Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Ann Murphy, and I'm the CEO and founder of the Empowered Fundraiser Consulting and Coaching. We are based in Corvallis, Oregon, proudly and happily, but work with clients all over the world and have had the opportunity through our work with AI in particular to spend lots of time with people in communities globally that, up until now, I haven't had the opportunity to do such work. So it's been an absolute delight and opened up a whole new space for me, and is something that when I'm talking to people about being involved in the AI revolution, I can highly recommend the aspect of being able to be in communities of practice with people around the world. Many of us have not had these opportunities, in our careers. So highly recommend that aspect of it. I have Shannon McCracken here today, and I'm really, really excited for our conversation. We're going to span the whole range of high level, like really important, really topical policy to how you have those policies and governance structures in mind as you implement AI in your own organization. And that can mean, when I say organization, that can mean you if you're a one-person shop. It can mean you if you are a consultant. It can mean you and your work bestie. It can mean you and 50 other people who are, hold on one second, who are involved in AI adoption. So think of this as, yes, we are going to provide some tactical recommendations, but we're going to contextualize that within policy. And I want to share that take what you need, leave what doesn't resonate, particularly with some of the tactical recommendations, because they won't all apply to everybody, but there are certainly some common threads there. Okay, so you're here and we're delighted. I wanted to share a little bit about what is going on in our world right now. And first, I wanted to share, I've been really thinking a lot about this quote by Brene Brown. She talks about being in the arena and being brave with your life. And I think about this in the AI realm a lot because bunches of us are out here talking about AI, which is the wild, wild west, right? We're saying things that, tomorrow may change, right? We're working with tools and platforms that are the worst they will ever be today, right? In fact, that's not even true, because we may, open up like ChatGPT tomorrow and it's having a bad day and it's not working as well as it was yesterday. So keep that in mind. When you're out here, you are taking a risk. You're out on a little bit of a limb. An example I'll give is that, you know, I think a lot about the environmental impact of tools like ChatGPT. And my daughter texted me a couple of days ago, because I teach her and all of her friends how to use AI in their college career. And she said, "Mama, these generative AI tools, they use so much energy." And in that moment, I thought, I wonder if my daughter is ashamed of the work that I do, because I'm out here, right, championing AI and optimism around it. And, yes, for important social justice reasons, that's where I come from on it. But nonetheless, the work that I do to enable other people to use generative AI does then put more people out into the world who are doing endless numbers of chats every day, creating images, and there's the data point about every image takes the equivalent of the energy it would take for us to create a bottle of water. So even in my case, where I've done a lot of work around my own ethical like boundaries and my values and how my work with AI supports my values, I still have moments of, like Brene Brown calls them, vulnerability hangovers, right? So I just wanted to put it out there that, this speaks to what I've talked about again and again, that the three things you need to be quote unquote good at generative AI are a curious mind, a willingness to be vulnerable, and community. So I highly encourage all of you who are out there, first of all, consider us your community. We're here for you. Like in my case, this is what I do all day, every day, is I work with individuals and groups of people and enterprise level organizations to build community around AI and help people adopt it in a responsible and beneficial manner. But this quote from Brene Brown has really been on my mind a lot, that, that element of vulnerability, it's not a weakness, it's our greatest measure of courage. My one of my partners in my business and in the work that we do with education and AI is Rachel Kimber. And she, if you don't already follow her on LinkedIn, highly, highly, highly recommend. She's an absolute powerhouse, a thought leader in this space, and talks about creating brave spaces, not just safe spaces. Safe spaces are incredibly important, but taking it to the next level with creating brave spaces and inhabiting those spaces is really important to us. So a couple of things that we have going on in our community. One is, and I had a QR code for this. Let's see if this is it. I believe so. We have our She Leads AI forum coming up on December 12th. It's at 8 a.m. Pacific, 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific. It's virtual. And our theme is leading change at critical moments. The goal of this event is to equip participants with leadership skills that they will bring out into their communities, their organizations, into, their collaborations through hearing from multiple women leaders who have had the moment where they have needed to, pivot or stand up or maybe speak back to the status quo within the realm of AI leadership. So we're going to have represented an AI ethicist who will talk about AI in the realm of all industries, and then we're going to have industry specific panelists to talk about how their leadership is showing up in their specific vertical. We'll have an executive coach there who will help us work through a leadership exercise, and we'll also do some networking. So that's a really high impact 2 hours of your life. We hope you will join us. Everyone is welcome, and the QR code is there on the screen. We have a couple of sponsorship opportunities still available. If that's of interest, please reach out to me and or Jasmine Schwartz. Jasmine is also on LinkedIn. She's our sponsorship guru, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So She Leads AI on December 12th. The other thing that we have going on is Rachel and I are holding another one of our AI boot camps. That's in January. Our AI boot camps, as a reminder, for those of you who haven't heard me talk about this before, they are hard skill oriented. When you finish your boot camp, you will have all of the AI, generative AI skills you need to significantly level up your work. And it's not just about saving time, right? This is about doing better research, gaining more meaningful insights. This is about creating avatars and personas to bounce your strategies against. Yes, it's about creating content, but that's really, to be honest, the least interesting part about generative AI, in my opinion. But what we really lean into is the leadership and identity component. So when, after you've completed that course with us, and it's live, it's a small group, it's very deep. When you've completed that course, you're ready to go to your organization and say, I have a point of view on this. I would like to be part of leading the charge with this. So keep an eye out for that. Registration is open, and in a few minutes, I'll actually drop that link into the chat. So that's a little bit about what we have going on, and we warmly, warmly welcome anyone to be involved with any of these programs. That is the beginning, middle, and end of what we're here for. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I will stop screen sharing. I just wanted to share that little poem or quote with you. And in a second here, I'm going to bring on Shannon McCracken, who is extremely highly regarded in our field and has been included in the top 50 group of nonprofit leaders for the past 3 or 4 years by, I believe the source is Nonprofit Times, but I'll ask Shannon to correct me if that's inaccurate. The work that she has done in policy and that she does every day, boots on the ground, sleeves rolled up, running a team of people who are keeping an eye on hot topics like one of the ones that we'll talk about today. I'm delighted to have her here on the show and honored and privileged to share her expertise with all of you. And I hope during our conversation that you'll chime in the chat and share any questions that you might have for me and Shannon, and in fact, share your thoughts on AI policy, AI integration, ask questions and share your experiences with AI policy. So with that, I'm going to bring Shannon on and ask her to give us a more fulsome introduction of herself. So thank you so much for being here, Shannon.
Oh, and that introduction was lovely. I don't know that I want to add much more to that. That should come on every day. That was a feel good.
Well, excellent. I thought we would kick off with a little getting your point of view and talking points around the legislation that's under consideration for nonprofits going forward, and particularly what we need to have an eye out in 2025.
Sure. So let's talk about the real hot topic for today, which is HR 9495. This is the one that, in case everybody doesn't keep track of all the bill numbers, this is the one that everybody's been humming about that could allow Treasury the power to withdraw a 501c3's tax exempt status on the presumption of funding or being involved with terrorist organizations or terrorist activity, which on its face, all of us can agree we don't want money, tax exempt or otherwise, going to terrorist organizations. However, the concern, particularly going into the new administration, is that the legislation is not written tightly enough to define what terrorism means. And so it could be applied to groups working on progressive work, reproductive care. The list is sort of endless, right? And that's the example for this upcoming administration. Once a law is on the books, it opens to sort of any way that a future administration would want to interpret that. So a lot of concern about this legislation. It did go to the House floor this morning. It did pass on a vote of 219 to 184, I believe. So it will be moving on to the Senate, which is as expected. We do believe that with the current Senate in the next couple of weeks that we have the power and strength there to prevent it from moving forward. If we're successful in that, though, we will absolutely see it again in 2025. So it's something to be very aware of. It is tied, and part of its momentum is that it's tied to another piece of legislation that would ensure that Americans who are held hostage do not suffer tax penalties for late payment of their taxes, while they are held hostage. So again, let's acknowledge that we need an act of Congress to make this true. We all support that, but with these two pieces tied together, it has momentum to move forward.
Could you share a real life example of what that could mean for, say, can we go with higher ed? Maybe?
Well,
yeah.
Sure. If an organization is tax exempt, if it's a 501c3 organization and its tax exempt status is revoked, a couple of things happen, right? The most obvious is that funding that it receives does not continue to be tax deductible. That's going to be very concerning to donors. It's going to be concerning to funders. It's, it changes all of those tax status. It has financial implications immediately for the organization and the way that it needs to file, the way it remains an upstanding organization. It's also tarnishing its reputation. If an organization is labeled as associated with terrorist organizations, even if it is somehow able to remedy that and correct that, which is a big if, it will always have that label. Imagine overcoming that. Go talk to your PR team about what that looks like. There were always, so I mean, just at a very basic level, and then we could start to go down the path of what that looks like for individual organizations and the employees who work there and the people that they serve.
The people that they serve in particular. Yeah. How did those two things get linked up? I'm naive enough about the way the world works. Mm-hmm. How does removing any potential tax penalties for people who are held hostage get linked up with nonprofits and their purported affiliation with terrorists?
Yeah, and I won't pretend that I can explain all the ins and outs of how legislation, but it's not uncommon for packages to get packed together. Sometimes it's a way of making compromise. If the Republicans want one thing and the Democrats want another, and everybody's stuck on both of those issues, if we package them together, suddenly there's a little more room to be like, okay, here's where we're willing to give. Sometimes things can be associated together because of a commonality like tax implication, so it's coming through the same committee, having similar support, and that can give it legs. And very often something that is unpopular is going to be attached to something that is more popular, very strategic. And both parties, all politicians are going to use that tactic.
Yep. Okay, so while we're having our very important, and in my case, remedial civics lesson, can you tell us a little bit more about legislation that we should have our eye out for in 2025, and also other policy considerations that are on your mind or keeping you up at night?
Sure. So I'll start with two, and then we'll kind of shift gears into AI and talk a little bit more about that. That would be a good segue for us, right? Two that we want to watch really closely at the beginning of the year. One is the universal charitable tax deduction. So right now, that most Americans don't have access to that specific tax deduction. With the gigantic tax package that is due for renewal or due to expire, and parts of that will be renewed and changed next year, we need to ensure that the charitable tax deduction is in that, so that all Americans, regardless of their income, can take advantage or have the privilege of that tax benefit when they make contributions to charitable organizations. Right now, it's only a couple percentage points of our wealthiest Americans who have access to that specific deduction. So when we think about democratizing giving and we think about building support, people are not only giving to nonprofits because they get a tax benefit. We know that. It is only one of many motivations. However, let's ensure that it is in place, because we also all know that nonprofits and the work that we do reduce the strain that would otherwise fall on government and elsewhere. And so the government incentivizing that and helping to buffer some of the expense of that is just, is good democracy and good politics. But it costs the government, right? Any tax deduction costs the government. So we have to be able to show that the cost is worth it. We expect that to, certainly start moving very early in the year and probably move faster than it has in the past, meaning, it won't take us all the way until November to know what's happening there. So watching for that. The other one is around a national data privacy standard. So, and I would just say Republicans who are more business focused are more in favor of a national standard. Democrats are less in favor of it and more likely to defer that power out to individual states. Our feeling on this is that we need a reasonable bipartisan federal standard so that we're all applying the same rules everywhere. And it doesn't matter, Anne, that you're in California and that I'm in Maryland and DC. Our protections are the same. And likewise, from a business standpoint, the protections that we owe and are responsible for to our members, to our donors, to our customers, to our clients are the same. We're all following those same rules. That has just been log jammed the past couple of years. With Republican control of Congress, we expect that could actually gain some momentum next year. So that's one to watch.
Does that, will, for the end users, will that look like when we go onto a website and there's a pop-up about cookies? Is that, yeah, okay.
Yes. Yeah. And opt-outs, how clear is it to opt out? How do I opt out? How do I understand what data is being collected about me, when it's collected, how it's being used, how I can have that data deleted? So there's a lot of common sense pieces in this, but when the rules or the standards or the laws are different state by state, that patchwork, difficult to navigate as a consumer, as an individual, and very difficult to navigate as a nonprofit or a business. And some states have been open to exemptions for nonprofits, which is lovely. But nonprofits are all working with for-profit companies and data providers and data processors, and so that that regulation is still very impactful. We shouldn't just look and say, "Oh, we're exempt," not an issue.
Such a poignant example of how our AI, technological advancements are pretty far out ahead of the infrastructure that we have around the use of that data, everything, right? The energy, the data, the social justice, every aspect of our society is like, we didn't realize, I don't think we all realized that we were going to be chasing the technology in the way that we are right now.
Yeah, very much so. And Congress was, they were more than slow. They didn't get behind regulating social media, and now they're playing the losing game of catch up on that. They've been very slow on data privacy regulation. I don't think they're going to make that mistake again with AI. And we're seeing lots of conversation, lots of traction, and I will say there's bipartisan legislation in the Senate put forth by the incoming new Senate Majority Leader, Senator Thune, and by Senator Klobuchar, that is pretty balanced. And I think a lot of that, it's not perfect, but it's a really good starting point. And some of that is because they have been very intentional about involving stakeholders in the process. They're not building this in a vacuum. They're not listening to only one voice or one group. They're really thinking and working, because everybody recognizes that this is going to change. As long as it takes for a law to pass, things are going to change. So they are trying to write this to anticipate, to be buttoned up and also nimble. And let's give credit where credit is due. That is tough. Tough work, but it's one to watch. And I think, again, we'll have some momentum, some activity in 2025.
So can you share, is that our segue into AI stuff?
Sure, let's go. Okay, I could talk all day.
So I was listening with great interest to a podcast that you did recently with Nathan and Scott of Fundraising AI and Donor Search. And you were sharing, and I can't remember, it aired a few weeks ago, but I'm not sure when you recorded it. But at the time of recording, you were in the process of doing some of the AI integration steps in your own organization. So I wanted to just kind of dive into that with you and learn about, I always love learning about the questions that leaders are asking themselves in the process of change management. So can you just share a little bit about what that process was like for you, what you learned along the way, and if there are any recommendations you might have for people listening right now about, what they might want to have in mind as they think about adoption at their own organizations?
Yeah, that's sure. No, that's great. And I'll take a step back and just say a little bit about our organization. So the Nonprofit Alliance, I know I just glazed over that. The Nonprofit Alliance is both a trade association and a foundation. We have two arms for the nonprofit sector. We promote, protect, and strengthen the nonprofit sector, and we do that through our work on policy, through our community building with people, and then our programs. And our programs are mostly geared towards senior leaders. We have a little bit of a bent towards fundraising, but also more holistically staff and organizational health and governance. So our internal team is 7 people. So that means we have departments of 1, sometimes 2. And when we look at the Venn diagrams of people's roles. And so I started looking at AI tools really for two key reasons. One, more efficiency. How do we do our work better, faster, more effectively, and more innovatively? What are we missing? But the other part is, I feel a real responsibility to our staff, and particularly to our younger, more junior level staff, because as nice as it would be if they stay here for the next 35 years, right? They might actually move on someday. They might go somewhere else. And even if they were perfectly adept and comfortable at doing their jobs here, when they go out in the world, they are competing with other people coming from other organizations who have been exposed to have that skill set, which is going to be a baseline, right? Like it is. And so it's not just about upskilling us for the work we're doing here, it's upskilling us for the work that will come in the future. And that just weighed, and that sounds like I'm trying to wish away my staff, and it's just the opposite.
No.
But I really do feel that responsibility of making sure that if somebody has a nonprofit alliance on their resume and they're going to work somewhere else, I want people to be like, wow, they really learned about it at TNPA.
I'm so happy to hear you talk about that, because I don't hear that bubbling up as frequently as I would like to see, because I do believe that this will be table stakes for candidates we're recruiting and hoping to bring onto our teams. And to your point, the doing what's right isn't always doing what's easy, right? And preparing your current staff for their role, particularly if they are to stay in the social sector. It's like the rising tide lifts all boats, right? You're investing right now in the future of your organization, but also the rest of the industry. And I think that's so important. I can't imagine just the employment world is going to be pretty topsy-turvy in the next few years. And if we can make that a little bit easier on our staff, our current staff right now, by preparing them for what's up next, that's for the good of the order. I'm delighted to hear you say that, because I feel the same way.
Yeah. And, and I think now, and we've landed on a platform and a tool set and some general practice and some loose accountabilities for just getting in there and using it. And, and some people are diving in with lots of enthusiasm and uncovering things and sharing with excitement, and others have a little more trepidation and need a little nudge. And I think that's true for any kind of change that an organization introduces. But it is about building that comfort level and that familiarity, and also figuring out where it doesn't work, or it doesn't work right now. And that's part of building our own guardrails too.
Totally. So I just tomorrow is the last day of a course that I'm doing with SHRM, which is the Society for HR Managers, or the M stands for something like that. Anyway, there are 70 HR professionals who've been learning how to use AI themselves, then how to lead the adoption in their own organizations. And it's been really fun to dive into some of those really sticky HR applications, because along the way, we've uncovered plenty of areas actually, where there's momentum toward using AI in HR functions, but that momentum pretty quickly bumps up against some serious ethical concerns. Right. And to have 70 HR leaders in a space really tackling this stuff, and it's knotty, right? It's not always going to be straightforward. If their CEO is saying we need higher throughput of candidates to position, or applicants into candidate pools, and HR is like, but we shouldn't be using AI tools to screen those, there's a significant rub there. And these people have career paths and, annual performance reviews, and, so it's been really cool, because I see HR as one of the areas where there's a lot of reward, but also a lot of risk, A
lot of risk. And part of that reward can be not only the speed of the throughput, but also, are there some, we all like to talk about, we all acknowledge the biases that exist within AI data sets. It also exists within human behavior. That's why it's in the data sets, because programmed it in there, um, uh, often unknowingly. And so, where can we acknowledge that and correct for it, perhaps more easily with technology than we can with human behavior? Where is there the ability to screen and sort based on certain very clear experience level criteria,
Mhm.
without letting other things muddy the water? So,
Exactly.
but yes, HR is a great example of where it is super messy. Fundraising is another area, and that's one of the areas where probably the most work is being done by the most organizations in terms of implementing AI. Um, and there's also a lot of room um, for some danger zones there in ways that we may not recognize right away.
Right.
And this is not me like trying to be like scaring away from AI. I think there's huge potential in fundraising
Yep.
for it. And I also think about, for example, what we have built using data modeling and algorithms that tell us, particularly at a mass market level, like tell us who our best donors will be. And that predictability, creates more efficiency. We have higher lifetime value of donors. We have more loyal donors, all the KPIs that we defined as most important. And we have left out a significant portion of the American public in inviting them in to be donors. So they were, because they don't look like, behave like the consumers and the donors that we
Yep.
have on our file now. And then we sit back and go, gosh, our files are declining and fewer households are giving. And, is there a decrease in generosity? What's happening here? And we're only really beginning to say out loud the ownership that we need to take and what we've created here, but we haven't corrected for it. And so that's just one, and we haven't corrected for it because it's feeding our organizations. It's
Yes.
to,
Where's
to
the
change,
incentive?
right? And we'd have to change our investment. We would have different ROI. It's risky. And when we're talking about
Careers.
risk to what
Yeah.
is keeping the lights on and the staff employed and
Boards.
the mission
Yeah.
happening, so how do we see that and say, okay, AI could be exponentially more make all of this exponentially more powerful? What are the checks and balances that we put into place to
Yeah.
put it in the right direction in the first place and course correct, test, along the way?
One of the things that I love about this moment in history is how it gives us, no choice but to rethink the status quo. And in fact, break what's already broken. Like it was already not a great idea for us to engage, utilize predictive analytics in a way that excluded significant chunks of the American public, right? We could have and arguably should have done better. And now we've created a little bit of a monster that we're going to need to correct on, even though it's going to be really, really hard to do that. But because of where we are with AI, it's like, whoa, what else have we been doing that we get to reevaluate now because it's kind of all blended together? When I was at the International Fundraising Congress a few weeks ago, we had this really interesting conversation. Nathan Chappelle was moderating, and there were folks from Salesforce and Microsoft and other platforms. And the conversation was about this, right? How do we use this data to raise more money? And
Mhm.
whether certain levels of information should be included in our data points. And where I went with it in terms of like the break what's already broken consideration is I was thinking about how my whole life as a fundraiser was in major and principal gifts. So I oftentimes approach conversations like with those kind of blinders on. And so the conversation was really about like direct response, but my mind went to our one-on-one relationships with donors and how in those deep, trusting relationships, we learn so much about our donors. And a significant portion of that goes into the database, right? Not all of it, right? We know we have rules for what goes in and what doesn't. But I mean, we're talking about hopes, dreams, values, fears, what we hate, what we love. Like you put all these data points together, and this is a really thorough profile of a human being. And then, we use that information to voila, present giving opportunities that may inspire their action. And I think of the example of, using, learning about a death in the family and then presenting an opportunity to give, say, to find a cure, help find a cure, or something like that, where we have used some I know it's all well intended. And it's also an example of, we have used some very intimate data to drive behavior on our part in our industry, to inspire the donor to do something, which isn't all that different, at least from a, from a staging point of view. It's not all that different than taking, a piece of information about on a donor journey on a website. We find out it's a memorial gift. We find out a little bit more about them. And again, all of a sudden we're presenting them with opportunities for that. So, it's pretty emotional. It's not, Nathan and I have been talking nonstop about the difference between manipulation and inspiration. And never have I ever thought about that line more than I have been, in the past several months. Where we stand on that. Yeah.
Well, and you're right that AI is where we're changing the status quo, and we're looking at the pause that happens when we look at what data sets are going into systems. What are we choosing to include or exclude? And then, stepping back, Mina Das with Namaste Data, she puts out great content and guidance on identifying bias in data, and starting from the data collection point, starting from the very beginning of how we're even asking the questions when we're collecting zero party and first party data, and not only the intent but the wording and there is a very positive point here that we are acknowledging it, we're recognizing it, we're diagnosing it, and we're addressing it in ways that we haven't necessarily been poking those same kinds of holes. We're making the same kinds of accountability commitments to some of what we've been doing for a long time.
Absolutely. So for those of you who are out there, here's one of these practical nuggets. If you are currently working on a strategic plan or a campaign plan or a data policy or a digital transformation, do yourself the favor of concurrently working through your AI governance and policies, because those things are absolutely intertwined. AI is a generalist. AI is not inside IT. It's not inside IS. It's not inside HR. It impacts all of us. Everyone who's involved with your strategic planning process should be involved with your AI policy development. On that note, I'm going to share how we envision the AI integration roadmap for people. And I want to preface it by saying that, there are very few benchmarks in the AI revolution. Like, we are all on an adventure together. We, make our decisions with the information that we have, with all of the thoughtful consideration that we can bring into it, aligned with our organization's vision and mission. That said, it can look a lot of different ways. This is how it looks so far with the people that we're working with. But again, this is an example of, this could change tomorrow. Our talk, my presentation next week could be slightly different, just based on the number of integrations that we've done. But I'll share just a couple of things that I think are really important. And all of this is in the context of our governance and our policies. So keep in mind the things that Shannon and I have already discussed, and that kind of surrounds all of this. But one of the things that we have found, and that's come up in a couple of different studies, including the annual one from the Marketing AI Institute, is that training programs are absolutely essential. That it's very, very difficult to make decisions on resource allocation or how you're going to apply AI to use cases if you don't have the skill set, at least a glancing skill set of how to use the tools. Ethan Mollick gives the metric of, it takes 10 hours of time spent with AI, and you should have, you should be developing your kind of intuition around how AI interacts. And I'm using AI as synonymous with generative AI. And when I talk about ChatGPT, I really mean all of the frontier models. But looking at how important training is to our overall journey of AI adoption is really important. And I haven't seen an example yet of being able to successfully integrate AI at an enterprise level without investing in training programs. So I leave that there for your consideration. There are lots of training programs out there. I recommend looking for ones with people who have actually done this work. I believe there's a lot of really important training that's taking place from a more of an adult education perspective. I also think that when you're focused on AI adoption, it's important to be working with people who have done the actual work. That's a bias that I have, and it's not only self-serving. It is self-serving, but it's not only self-serving. The next step that we recommend is the formation of an AI council. And you can call that anything. You could call it a task force, a committee, a champions group, a circle. It doesn't matter. We typically revert to AI council, but whatever your nomenclature is, the culture of your organization is fine. This is a group of champions guiding AI strategy and governance. And when we say champions, I don't mean that these are people who should do work out of the kindness of their heart at night and on weekends. In my cohort of the 70 HR professionals, I learned that a lot of organizations have very thoughtful approaches to compensating people for the work that they're doing on a committee like this. We don't want to be taking advantage of the fact that people are enthusiastic about AI. We really want to be ensuring that those people are recognized for this new work that they're doing, and that in many cases they're actually compensated for it. So I wanted to put that out there. And AI Council sounds pretty dry, so I want to throw in there that the AI Council can also be the group of people who figures out, do we have hackathons? Do we give everybody half day off every month? Do we have awards? Do we have pizza parties? Like, how are we navigating adoption, aka massive behavior change, and even considering things like how do we support the conscientious objectors? So what is our methodology? What community do we provide people who at the end of the day just simply are not on board with integrating AI into their lives? Those people exist, and we need to have like a game plan for that. Stakeholder inclusion. So there's a really good training on one of the LinkedIn Learning courses that's sponsored by LinkedIn and Microsoft, and it introduces the LISA model, LISA, about engaging stakeholders. And I think this is incredibly important, particularly in the nonprofit sector, because, as Nathan Chappelle will share frequently and rightly so, is what we have is stakeholder trust. That's what we broker in. So in the absence of stakeholder trust, our whole sector is in a pickle. But here we have the opportunity to actually increase our stakeholder trust, but it's going to require things like Shannon and I were just talking about, like your data privacy and security policies and systems and protocols have to be top tier, or we will run the risk of reducing stakeholder trust. So working on that is really important. When we think about what our policies and governance look like, my plea is don't go onto the internet and download a policy and think that you now have AI governance. This comes up a lot. I get probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 emails or DMs a week, people asking, hey, can you send me a link to an AI policy? And we've actually, as an organization, stopped providing those links because we feel we don't want to contribute to the possibility that somebody's downloading, a policy or going on ChatGPT and asking for one and saying, okay, cool, we've got our governance all squared away. So we, kind of work with people a little bit more on that. So I would just encourage you all to do that. And then along the way, you're going to get to make some decisions about platforms. So it's going to be really, really helpful for you to have that training in order to dive into those decisions. It's some platforms are better fits for your culture than others for the work that you actually do. Um, I'll give an example. My daughter's in college, and their university's policy is that they use Copilot. And I asked her the other day if she knows what Copilot is. She doesn't know what Copilot is. She's never heard of Copilot. Just like so many organizations and so many employees, the students are bringing ChatGPT to the table. Like, they don't even know Claude. They don't even know Meta or Gemini or anything. It's just like they just think of AI and they think of ChatGPT, never even heard of Copilot. So here we have an organization that has decided that their whole institution is only going to use Copilot. And that's not actually what's happening in reality. So thinking about how platforms are actually integrated, really good idea. Having focus groups, having that AI council that includes students, for example, and in nonprofits cases, includes constituents, includes board members, really, really important. And this is, of course, very, very high level, but continuous improvement. So an ongoing commitment to continuous improvement is so important. This is not going to be a one and done, right? This is going to be that digital transformation, the AI policies and governance and integration is an iterative process that requires a lot of evaluation, a lot of attention. And as I wrap up this component, I'll just share that in our work with clients, what's been really interesting to us is that we don't bump up against any resistance around, the financial investment in AI, because by the time people are ready to be in a conversation about AI training and AI adoption, they understand that the ROI is there, right? That they're going to invest some money up front and then they're going to make money back on it through cost savings or better work product or new sales, new revenue, et cetera. Less turnover, all those good things. But what we do run into is a lot of resistance around the time investment. Folks are not comfortable yet with the notion of the kind of, it's a go slow to go fast situation, or as one of my friends says, go slow to go smooth. So on the front end, you're going to invest a lot of time, right? And a lot of really good attention. But then that kind of titrates out. And as you kind of amortize that over the course of 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 3 years, the time investment becomes smaller because you have that context, you have that intuition, you know where to pay attention to for policy and changes in the platforms, et cetera. But I share that because as folks are planning what their year looks like in 2025, thinking about the various initiatives that you have on your calendar and making space for how you're going to tackle AI, I would highly recommend that, because I think it's going to happen one way or another. There's going to come a moment where your organization goes, okay, all of a sudden we have to deal with this. And it could be because your board chair is saying, hey, listen, I invest in a well-run organization, the nonprofit. I run a company. We've done all the hard things to integrate AI responsibly and beneficially in our organization. Hey, nonprofit, how come you haven't done that yet? So I think that there's going to be a moment, and I don't want people to be caught flat-footed on that. So I think making space for that in 2025 as you do your planning is really helpful. One other little tiny snippet is when I think about the AI Council, here are some of the steps. I talk about initiating an AI Council. It could be you setting up a 1-hour meeting on your calendar next week to go to like fundraisingai.com or I think it's FAI.com, and reviewing the framework toward responsible AI in fundraising, which applies pretty generally to other nonprofit business operations. It could be 1 hour on your own calendar becoming educated, right? Then it can be you and your work bestie. Then it can be a brown bag. Then you get it sanctioned by your leadership, of course, right? That just happens, that just falls out of the sky. Formalizing a structure, coming up with a charge for what you're going to do. You may be involved with some of the, some of the fun things, related to, we're just pressing buttons here, related to change management. And then, like I said, the ongoing continuous improvement. So those are some of the things that we can include in a AI council, or if you want to come up with a much less boring or clinical term for it, please do. So I hope that's helpful to people, and I can always share, slides. I made these slides with Napkin AI in probably 90 seconds. So, and I'm happy to show anybody how to do that someday, but they're a work in progress. So check back with me tomorrow to see if I've changed my mind on any of these things.
And I really appreciated what you were saying about a policy, organizational policy around use of AI. And the Nonprofit Alliance has a leadership lab, which is a cohort of senior leaders, convenes monthly on various topics. And I guess it was about a year ago now, we were looking at AI policies and dissecting them and, talking about, because we were getting a lot of the same questions that you are, like, what's the template? What's the fill in the blank, right? And so a couple of organizations did share their policies, which we anonymized, that we could just look at those samples and sort of pull out. And of course, the what and the how was different across the different ones. But the one piece that really stood out to me that kind of was like a make or break for the strength of the policy was 3 prongs. One was tying the use of AI and the fact that they have a policy guiding AI, tying that to the mission and the values of the organization. So like, we are using AI to, and then, the work that they are doing to strengthen communities, to, fill in the blank. It's different for everybody, but like anchoring everybody to the reason for the work and that AI is going to be a benefit to that. Yeah. The second was talking about or acknowledging that the policy will change, and even giving a little bit of insight into this. So and some of them were even called like interim policies, acknowledging we need something. This is imperfect. It is going to evolve. And if they knew as much, saying what that evolution would look like. In 6 months, we will revisit this. Here is like the AI council who's leading this, but like creating that accountability and acknowledgement that the policy is not going to be one and done. And then the third prong was informing staff of how they could be involved in the process, providing input, raising their hand, sharing feedback, asking questions. So inviting in, this isn't just we post it on the wall of the mailroom or send it out in everybody's Slack and then, you hereby live by these, but really if it's going to evolve, we need to have voices at the table on that. So those 3 pieces, the voices, the accountability, and the tying to the mission, for me, made some of those policies really stand out and probably give them more strength and sense of ownership across the entire organization.
That, everybody, is a mic drop. I'm going to put these three things somewhere with credit to you and your organization, because I am so in agreement. Like, these things are essential and also so easy to overlook because of the way we've always done things, right? We typically haven't involved the intern in organizational wide, decisions, right? Or the assistant director. Now we get to, right?
You don't need to have everybody's involvement in your whistleblower policy or your, paper destruction policy. Like, those things just exist, and your legal team wrote them and everybody lives by them, and you saw them somewhere in your staff handbook, right? But AI is more of a living, breathing dynamic, affecting all of us day in and day out, even to the point that you were making about, the whole organization's using Copilot, except for all the people that have no idea what Copilot is, and they're all using ChatGPT or whatever else they want to, it's There has to be that buy-in in order for it to exist. And in order to get buy-in, you need that ownership.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, in our final few minutes, will you share with the nice people how they can learn more about what your organization is up to and how they can follow your thought leadership, particularly as we go into 2025 and all of the important legislative topics that are, that are going to be hot topics in the year ahead?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So come to our website. We have a ton of information on our website, tnpa.org. We have a whole section on policy that you can go down the various pages of what's happening at the federal and some at the state level with some key policy issues. You can sign up on the homepage for our newsletter, which includes a general newsletter, our program announcements, and our legislative roundup. One went out today talking about the House bill and post-election forecast and so forth. So that's a once a month. You can sign up for that. And then check out our programs. We have a calendar of events. We have a nonprofit fundraiser symposium coming up here in Washington, D.C. in March. So if you're a senior level fundraiser, we invite you to take a look at that program. Come join us for a couple days in March. Enjoy the cherry blossoms. We also have the year-round leadership lab that I mentioned, and a leadership summit and a rising leaders summit that will come up later in 2025 as well. So we invite you to come check us out. Much of that is available to you, even if you're not a member. And then, of course, if you're interested in membership, always delighted to have those conversations. Our members are both nonprofit organizations and companies and consultants that work with nonprofits across a variety of areas. And membership dues are set on a sliding scale. So check us out.
Oh, that's wonderful. I didn't even know about that. Awesome. Great. All right, everybody. So those are the ways to stay in touch with what Shannon and her team are up to and what's going on in the world. The newsletter, I must not be on it because I would have opened today's with great interest. So I'm going to go onto the website and sign up right now. Shannon, thank you so much for everything you do in our sector and the impact that has on everyone, literally everyone, and also for coming on the show today. I really, really appreciate, especially given all the important work that you have on your docket this week. So thank you very, very
wonderful. Thanks for inviting, Anne, and thanks for helping to amplify some of these big issues we have coming up on Capitol Hill as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So everybody, thank you so much. As I said, consider us your community. Be in touch, reach out, join our programs. We're always, always, always happy to have you. So thank you again, everybody. And we'll see you isn't next Thursday Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving, yep. Don't do a show that day.
So we won't see you that day, but we'll see you the following week.